Boker Tov, my friends. Good morning. Let us discuss today's Daf Yomi, which is Kesubos Daf Nun, Kesubos 50. We're going to start on the top of Nun Amid Aleph. The Gemara tells us, Amar Rabbi Yelah. Rabbi Yelah is continuing with his statements about what they instituted at when the Sanhedrin was in Usha. Sanhedrin went on 10 travels after it left the Lishkas Hagazos, and before it was disbanded, it stopped in 10 places or made 10 journeys. Some of those places were doubled, and there we said, Rabbi Yelah says, Be'usha, in the place called Usha, they instituted Hamavazves, that one who gives charity, and that's how most people understand it, one who gives charity. Some commentaries understand it as a general teaching about mitzvot in general. Hamavazves, all Yavazves Yoser Mechomesh. You're not supposed to give more than 20% to charity, Shemei Yitzdarach Brios, because then you might end up yourself needing help from the community. So even though this is what the statement is, there are 7 or 8 or even more exceptions to this rule. So the most famous ones are if the person's very wealthy themselves, then they're not going to need help. If they give more than 20% and they can afford it, then it's not an issue. Another exception is if a person is leaving it after their death. It's obviously not going to be a problem. A third exception, Chafetz Chaim, based upon earlier sources, says if a person is supporting Torah study, well then it's not giving it away because you're a partner in it. And so therefore it's your partnership. So you can give more than 20%. These are just some of the exceptions to the rule. Also, not only if you're supporting Torah study, but also for your own Torah study. That's also an exception to this rule. Another exception to the rule is if the poor person is right in front of you and they're desperately in need of help. But anyway, as a general rule, this is the rule about tzedakah. You're not required to give, or some say you're not allowed to give more than 20%. But are you supposed to give as much as 20%? So that is another question. So here is another dispute, and most opinions are that you're not required by Jewish law, but it's called midas chasidus. It's an act of piety to give that amount. But that the idea of giving 20% is just a midas chasidus, but not a requirement. So this also applies to positive commandments from the Torah, that you're not supposed to spend more than 20% in the performance of a positive commandment. So let's say, for example, the mitzvah of writing a sefer Torah. It could cost, a new Torah scroll today could cost $60,000, $70,000. So if it's more than 20% of your income, then you're exempt from buying a new Torah scroll. Not necessarily exempt from writing one, because you can write one for much cheaper. You can get the parchment for much cheaper and then write it yourself. So you're not exempt from it from that perspective. Is it 20% of your net worth or 20% of your income? So Tosfos says, first year you give the tzedakah, it's 20% of your net worth. After that, you have to give 20% of your income, or the maximum is 20% of your income. And going back to our Gemara, Tanya Nami Hachi, indeed we went to the Brisa, Mavazves, Ayavazves Yosir Mechomesh, Shemei Yitzdarach Brios. There's a story about one person, Shabikesh Lavazves Yosir Mechomesh. It's a story about a person who wanted to give more than 20%. His friends didn't allow him to give more than 20%. And money, who was his friend? Rabbi Yeshivav. Rabbi Yeshivav stopped him. We already had Rabbi Yeshivav earlier in the Masechta. He was the one who was screaming about Rabbi Akiva was making Mamzerim Yisrael. Rabbi Yeshivav was tragically one of the Sarah Harugim Malchus, one of the 10 martyrs. Rabbi Yeshivav, some say Rabbi Yeshivav wanted to give it, and but his friend didn't allow him to give more than 20%. Umanu Rabbi Akiva, that was Rabbi Akiva. What's the pasuk that tells us that you're not allowed to give more than 20%? It's from Yaakov Avinu. Yaakov Avinu says, and this is why some say you're supposed to give 20%, because Yaakov says, before he goes out of the land of Canaan, when he's running away, he says, whatever you give me, God, I will make a tithe of a tithe. So there's 2 tithes. The Gemara says, but wait 1 second, that would only make 19%, not 20%. You can't compare the second tithe to the first tithe. They're not the same, because if you have $100 and you give 10%, then that's not, then you've given 10. But now if you take 10% of that 10, of the 90 that's left, that's 9. So then you've only given 19. So it's not 20%. So Amar Rav Ashi asks, it means that I'll tithe the latter one the same amount that I tithe the former one. Amar Rav Shimi bar Ashi Ushmus Halalu Mismatos Valchos. So he said Rabbi Eli was citing teachings from Usha, and these teachings were diminishing each time, meaning to say that the first time he quoted 2 other scholars, the second time 1 other scholar, and the third time Rabbi Eli just said it himself. The Simanech, the way you remember it, Ketanim, the first one is about Ketanim, then Kisfu, then a person who writes away all his money. And the third one is Bizbizu, one who wants to be Mavazves his money to charity. I'm Rav Yitzchak, but Usha is Kino. So now we're still talking about Usha. So Rav Yitzchak said in Usha, they instituted Shea Adam Misgalgal and Beno at Shtemas Reshana, that a person should be Misgalgal, meaning to say, Rashi understands this to mean he should go easy on his son until his son is 12 years old. But Mikam Ve'elach, Yori Mo'achayim. From then on, treat him harshly when it comes to Torah. If he's slacking, be strict with him. Any is this really the case? Amar Rav Shmuel bar Shilat Batzir mi bar Shit Votikabel. But Rav Shmuel bar Rav said to Shmuel bar Shilat that less than 6 years old, the kid's not going to be able to retain anything. Bar Shit Kabel from 6 years old, he'll be able to retain it. Visafi like a surah and stuff him like an ox. Meaning to say we should start before he's 12. So why do you say you only restricted him at the age of 12? So it says in stuff like a Torah, it means stuff him like an ox with the stuff he can retain it. But don't be so strict until after 12. The same alternative Mishnah. That one is for verses, one is for Mishnah. When it comes to verses, you start younger age. With scripture, when it comes to Mishnah, you do that only from the age of 12. Amar Bai Amrli Aim Bar Shitz Mikra, a 6-year-old for verses. Bar Eser Mishnah, 10 years old. This is 10 years old, not 12 for Mishnah. Bar Tleiser Tanisa. When a person enters into the 13th year, i.e., when they're over 12, they have to start fasting. They start fasting a 24-hour period. Uvetinokes, and if it's a girl, Bas Tracer, when she gets into her 12th year, i.e., when she's 11 years over 11, she has to start fasting, meaning to fast 24 hours. Because at the age of 12, then it'll be biblically obligated. So we're saying that you train her even the year before. Amar Bai Amrli Aim. Abai said, my mother said to me, and every time we mention Abai's name with his mother, he often cites his aim. We point out that this was not his biological mother, but it was the woman who adopted him, which is going to be relevant because we're going to see about the power of adoption, the spiritual power of somebody who adopts later below in this text. So Amar Bai Amrli Aim, Habar Shit, this boy who's 6 years old, this child who's 6, the Tarkale Akravav, Biyoma de Mishlam Shis, who is bit by a scorpion on the day he turned 6. If you just leave it, he's not going to live. It's very dangerous. So Mayasu say, what's the treatment? Merarta Dedaya Chayorta Bishikra Nashme Vinashkaya. You take the Merarta, usually translated as like the juice of the gallbladder, but there are other explanations that maybe this is part of the different parts of the animal, of the vulture, of the white vulture. You mix it with beer and you rub it and you drink it. You give it to him, you rub it on him and you drink it, and he drinks it. First of all, it's not kosher. The vulture is not kosher. How can you do this? So you're saying, okay, for its medicinal purposes, it's okay, but still, we have elsewhere that if it's a medicinal purpose that doesn't work, then you can't drink it if it's not kosher. So this must have been something that was tested. Hi Barashata the Tarakle Zibura Biyom the Mishlam Shata. Another example, there's a 6-year-old who was bit by a scorpion, by a hornet On the day he turns 6, lo chaye, he's not going to live. Maya suse, how do you treat him? Atsusa de dikla b'maya, you take the parts of the palm tree that grow on the bottom around the palm tree, you take it, you dip it in water and a shvaya v'nashka. You rub it on him and he drinks it. And Amarav Katina, kol machnes espeno pachos mi ben sheish, whoever takes your child into school when he's less than 6 years old, ratz acharav ve'eno magio. Then what's going to happen is that you're going to always be running after him to heal him, but you're never going to fix him because he's always going to be dangerous. Because you brought him into a situation when he was too young to appreciate it, he was too advanced. It's dangerous for him. Alternatively, or alternatively, his colleagues, his friends will always be running after him. And they're not going to reach him. And here we say, Rashi says, it means that his friends will always be trying to be as smart as he is in Torah study, and they're never going to be as smart because he got a head start. And both are correct. He'll be cholash v'gamer. He'll be weak, but he'll be very smart. He'll be weak, but he'll be very smart. So that's what's going to happen. Cholash v'gamer. Or alternatively, or depends if the kid itself is weak or healthy. If he's weak, then don't bring him into the school at such a young age because he's going to be too much for him. But if he's healthy, you can bring him in because he's doing okay and he'll be smart and he'll be strong. So it depends on the situation. Everything depends upon context. Obviously, when it comes to education, everything depends upon the context and each case is different. And for sure today, everything is very different, but they're giving general principles. So Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina tells us about another incident, another takana in Usha. In Usha, they instituted that a woman who sold her nichsei mulug b'chaye bala. So while her husband was alive, she sold her nichsei mulug. What's her nichsei mulug? This is her property that she took into the marriage, and her agreement with her husband was that her husband gets to keep the dividends of the property, the fruits, let's say, the rent money, where she retains the actual principal. So she retains the actual principal. So a woman who brings this into the marriage, and then she sells it while her husband is still alive, and then she dies. The husband is allowed to take it back from the people who purchased it. She says, the rabbis consider the husband like as though we purchased it from his wife, and he's the first purchaser, so he's able to retrieve it from the people who she sold it to. It's a dispute whether or not he has to pay them or not. But the rabbis institute that she doesn't have the right to sell it, even though she owns the principal. She doesn't have the right to sell it away from under her husband because he's getting the fruits of it. And presumably, he would have the option to purchase it as well. So Rabbi Yitzchak Bar Yosef found Rabbi Avo who was standing in the markets of Usha. Amrle man mara deshmaita to Usha. He said, who was the one who taught this teaching that of Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina, that a woman who sells her nichsei mulug, the husband's allowed to buy it back? Who's the one who taught this? He said, Amar Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina. He said, it was taught by Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina, Tanaminei Arba'in Zimnin. He learned it from him 40 times. And therefore, it seemed to him like it was placed in his pocket. Now the pasuk says, Ashrei Shomer Mishpat Osei Tzedakah. The verse from Tehillim says, happy is the one who guards justice and does charity b'chol eis at all times. So I asked the Gemara, can you really do charity at all times? Darshu Rabbeinu Shabiyavna. So our rabbis in Yavna taught to Rabbi Elazar Since it's Rabbi Elazar, Zan, Banavu Benosav Kashen Ketanim. This refers to somebody who supports his sons and daughters when they're little. That's somebody who's giving tzedakah at all times, meaning to say, because you're not obligated to do it. We learned yesterday at what age the rabbis instituted that you should do it, but technically speaking, there's not an obligation. Rabbi Shmuel Bar Nachmani Amar Zeh Megala Yasam Yisam Himself Beso. He says this refers to somebody who raises orphans in their home. That's the equivalent of giving charity at all times. Masiyan and marries them off. But he has wealth and riches in his house. And his charity and his righteousness stands forever. That one says this, that refers to one who studies Torah and teaches it. This refers to one who writes Torah, Nevi'im, and Ksuvim. Somebody writes a Torah scroll and lends it out to other people. So this is something that's doable. Everybody can write Torah scroll and lend them out to other people. You see children for your children, i.e. you'll see grandchildren. Shalom Yisrael, peace for Israel. Once you have children to your children, Shalom Yisrael, then there will be peace in Israel. Because you won't have to do chalitz or yibam. So all these problems we learned about attracting yivamas cause all this tension and difficulties in the family. So obviously it's better not to come to that situation. Rabbi Shmuel Bar Nachmani says, once you have children for your children, Shalom al Dayana Yisrael. That makes it easier on the judges, on the court system, because people are not going to fight. Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah made a drasha before the Chachamim that he said that you support the daughters and the children after the marriage from the estate. So we're on the top of Nuna Mabeis. Rav Yosef, Kamed Rav Hamnuna. Rav Yosef was sitting in front of Rav Hamnuna. I just want to point out the top Tosfos says, Mashma de Rav Yosef hayakata me Rav Hamnuna. This implies that Rav Yosef was younger than Rav Hamnuna. But in the first paragraph of Kedushin, it implies that Rav Hamnuna was a student of Rav Chisda. And Rav Yosef was a colleague of Rav Chisda. So therefore, it can't be that Rav Hamnuna, that Rav Yosef was younger than Rav Hamnuna. If Rav Hamnuna was a student of Rav Chisda, Rav Chisda was a colleague of Rav Yosef. How could Rav Yosef himself be a student of Rav Hamnuna? So Tosfos' answer is that there were two different Rav Hamnunas. So Rav Yosef was not exactly shocking. Like how many people named Cohen or David do you know today? There's a lot of people, so it's possible. So Rav Yosef Kamed Rav Hamnuna, Rav Hamnuna v'Kamar. So Rav Hamnuna was said, and he said a teaching. He says, "Kashem she'ena abanim yarshin el min hakarka." Just like when sons inherit, they inherit only from real estate. The Gemara is going to immediately challenge this, but that's what Rav Hamnuna was saying. So too, kach ein abanos nidonos el min hakarka. So too, the girls are only going to inherit only from real estate. So when Rav Hamnuna said this, when Rav Hamnuna said that the sons and the daughters both only inherit from real estate, everybody started murmuring and saying, "What's he talking about? The shavik ara who the yarsi lebnei, if he leaves behind land, his sons can inherit. The shavik ara well yarsi lebnei, if he doesn't leave behind land, his sons can't inherit. What are you talking about? What do you mean? You boys can only inherit real estate?" So I'm like Rav Yosef. So Rav Yosef says, "Why? Quiet. Maybe this is what Rav Hamnuna meant. Dilma Kesubos banim dichrin kamar." So he says maybe what the Rebbe is talking about is what we call the Kesubos banim dichrin, the Kesuba, the male Kesuba. What's the male Kesuba? That when as part of the Kesuba they instituted a clause, they inserted a clause that the property that the woman is bringing into the marriage doesn't get passed down to the if she predeceases her husband inherits her, that property remains with her children and doesn't go to any other children that the husband might have from a previous or later marriage. So that's what's called the male ksuba. So so Rav Yosef said maybe what Rav Hamnuna meant was the male ksuba is only collected from real estate and not from movable objects. So Amar Lay, so when Nunes heard this, he said, wow, Mar de Gava Rabba Aviyada my community. He said, you're such a great man, you knew exactly what I was talking about. Amar Rav Chia bar Yosef, Rav, but still, nevertheless, even though Rav Yosef and Rav Nunes said that the boy and the girls are only going to be either inherit or be supported by the real estate that's left. One time we learned that Rav supported the girls michite de aliyah, from the chite of the aliyah. So what's the chite of the aliyah? Chite is usually translated as wheat, and aliyah is either the upper chamber or the attic. What does it mean that Rav supported them from the chite of the aliyah? First of all, what does support mean? Parnasya hava. Maybe it was a dowry. We're talking about not support. My aliyah, me'ilave. Me'ilave da'av. Maybe aliyah means from the ilave da'av. What's the ilave da'av? Like Shmuel taught, the Shmuel, the Amar Shmuel, Parnasa, Shaman Ba'av. Like Shmuel taught, when it comes to figuring out the dowry, we do what's called calculation. Omdin, we calculate. According to, I'm reading from Rashi, what would be the father's stinginess or generosity if he would be alive? And that's how we would give to them from the estate that he left. And so therefore, since when it comes to calculations and estimates, there we would include both his real estate and his movable objects. So that's what Shmuel is, that's what Rav would do. Maybe Rav was, are you saying that Rav would, when he said from Nechitu Da'aliyah, it means that he was Ilave Da'ab, that we would calculate, we would estimate what the father would give for the dowry. Or perhaps, what does it mean? It means something else. Perhaps, maybe it means Mizone Mamish, maybe it refers to actually supporting of the daughters. Umay Aliyah. And what does it mean that he would give her from the chite of the aliyah? Midvarim tovim shenemrim b'aliyah. So no, this was something that came out from the good things that were taught in the aliyah. They used to gather. We know several times in the Shas, they used to gather. We learned this in Shabbos. We learned this in Sanhedrin. They used to gather in the aliyah and study intensely the halachos. So maybe this was something that came out from the aliyah that they learned. That you're allowed to collect from the metaltal and from the movable objects to support the daughter. The Amar Rav Yitzchak bar Yosef ba'aliyah eskinu. They instituted from the aliyah. They gathered up in the chambers. Maybe they're gathering in the attic because it was more secure for whatever reason. But in the aliyah, they instituted shiubanos nizonos menametalton. And indeed, the girls can also be supported not only from the real estate, but also from the metalton. So Gemara said, from the movable objects. Tashmas, Gemara wants to try and figure out what the answer is here. What does it mean? Bidei de Rebbe Banai, Achua de Rebbe Chia bar Abba, in the hands of Rebbe Banai, who was the brother of Chia bar Abba, have a metalton diasmi. They had the metalton of the orphans. They had the metalton of the orphans. So they had the movable objects, and they wanted to know, should they be supporting the girls from this estate? So also coming to Shmuel, I'm always zone. He said, okay, yeah, go support the girls from this estate. So he said, my love, doesn't that mean to give them support? Because Rav Yitzchak bar Yosef spiritually, and it means even like Rav Yitzchak bar Yosef that they made a takana that the girls can even be supported from the movable property, not just from the real estate. Gemara says no. There it was for a dowry. That's why he was taking the money. Shmuel Tamei Damar Shmuel Parnasa Shaman Ba'av. For a dowry, we estimate what would the father want to do with the money. And so there was an incident in Nardai, and the judges ruled to support the girls from the metalton, from the movable object. The Pumpatisa, there was another incident in Pumpatisa. Indeed, Rav Chana bar Bizna collected the money from the movable objects to support them. I'm Rav Nachman, the Zil Ahadro. So Rav Nachman said, go return the money. Go return the money. He said, go return the money. V'ilo, and he says, if you're not going to return the money, and he says, if you're not going to return the money, I'm going to collect your mansions, your big homes, in order to return them to the brothers. You took them and told them from the brothers to support their sisters, because you said they can be supported even from the movable objects. But I'm saying that's not correct. And I'll go down and seize your properties. Rabbi Ami and Ravasi supper amazing. Rabbi Ami and Ravasi thought that they could support the orphan girls from the movable objects. Amar Rabbi Yaakov Baridi, Milsa de Rabbi Yochanan Reish Lakish, Mo of the Beuvda Aton of the Edom Beuvda. Rabbi Yochanan Reish Lakish didn't even rule this way, and you want to rule this way? Rabbi Elazar suffered amazingly metalta. Rabbi Elazar said, I'm going to support from the movable objects. I'm a fan of Rabbi Shimon ben Eliakim. So Rabbi Shimon ben Eliakim said to him, Rabbi Yodani Bakach, She'emi desadina tauseh el midas rachmanos. He said, I know that you're intending to do this because you want to be merciful. Therefore, for this reason, you're going to support them from the movable objects. But I'm worried about this, I know you're not giving a real black letter law, you're just trying to help out in this situation, but I'm worried because of this ruling, Shema Yira Talmidim, maybe your students will see this, the Yikfu Halacha L'Doros, I'm going to think that's always the halacha, even if it's not an extreme circumstance. Hahuda Asla coming to Rav Yosef, there was once a person who came for Rav Yosef for judgment. He said to them, give the girls for support, give them from the dates that were gathered up from the tree, and they were placed on Abuja. They were placed on the mats, which is, so there, Rashi says these are the machatzlos, shenoslim tachas adekohen. These are the mats they used to place under the palm tree, kishigodu, not tomorrow, when they would cut down the palm trees. They climb up the tree, cut down the dates, they'd fall on the mats. So they're movable objects. So Rav Yossi says, still, you could give it to the daughters. So even though it's movable property, Abaye says, so Abaye says, even if it was a creditor has the right even to take from property where there's a lien on it. He also wouldn't be able to collect from the metalton of the orphans. And this you want to collect for these girls from the metalton of their brothers. You want to collect for support, and they have even less of a claim than an actual creditor. So Abaye was upset with his Rebbe's ruling, Rabbi Yossi's ruling. So Amar Lei, so Rabbi Yossi responds to Abaye, Dechazia Ubudja Kamina. I didn't say take it from the actual dates that were on the ground, because those would be considered movable property, but I meant to take it from those that were Chazu Ubudja, those that were about to be cut, but they were still attached to the ground. So says the Gemara, wait 1 second, that's not a solution. So if we have a principle, if it's about to be cut, it's like it's actually cut, and so therefore it's like it's a movable object. We don't care if it's actually cut, just ready to be cut. Mara says, no, the tricho adikla kamina. No, they're not yet ready to be cut because they still need some support from the palm tree. They're not 100% right because they still need some nourishment. Those are the ones they said to cut and give them to the girls. Okay, if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to address the questions.